Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us in the first in a series of events called Spotlight on the Western Balkans. European Movement International, together with the European Movement in Finland, and in cooperation with our members from the region, particularly today European Movement Albania and North Macedonia, is organizing this series of events in order to foster debate on the Western Balkans in the EU and wider Europe, and engage as much as possible all relevant political, social, economic stakeholders, civil society stakeholders in the discussion about where is Western Balkans in the EU enlargement process and what is the state of affairs of the EU enlargement policy and as such. Today we have with us very distinguished speakers and colleagues and friends from the European Movement Albania, Executive Director Gledis Gjipali. Gledis, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Then, Nikola Jazadziski, who is coming from European Movement North Macedonia. Nikola, welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining. And last but not the least, we have Tyyne Karjalainen, who is coming from Finland, from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Tyyne is researcher at the European Union Research Program of the mentioned Finnish Institute. Tyyne, welcome to the event and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the topic of the enlargement and the Western Balkans is, one would argue, not very often very high on the EU agenda. But recently, in the last couple of months we had a series of events that brought to the attention the Western Balkan region. Just recently, several weeks ago, we had the European Commission launching enlargement package, a series set of reports that assesses the progress of the Western Balkan countries in the EU accession process, but also elaborates on the recommendations and roadmaps of where they should foster their engagement in order to be faster and more quality in the process. But also earlier we had first ever visit of the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, to the Western Balkan countries. And we had EU Western Balkan Summit in Brdo in Slovenia under the Slovenian EU presidency. In the last two mentioned events, so to say, a very strong political signal and message was sent that the EU is counting on the Western Balkans and that there is a perspective for the Western Balkan countries' membership in the EU. However, not everyone is satisfied with the pace, quality of the progress of the countries, and there are many reasons and causes for this, but I would start by asking us to remind us why is the EU enlargement, or from the Western Balkan perspective, accession to the EU and joining the EU important for the countries, societies and citizens of this region and for the EU. Gledis, I would like you first to take a comment on this in a couple of minutes or more if you wish.
Yes, thank you. Now I will try to keep it as short as possible. Of course, the European integration process in Albania is the main driving reform of the reforms in the country, and this has been for, let's say, for the last 20 years. It is also the European integration process, let's say that it has been also a little bit abused by the politicians because it's always a priority. But the country on the other side, it's not has not progressed that rapidly if it was a real priority. So, but this is for the part of the political class. For the part of the people or the general public, there is a huge support for the EU integration process and membership, which has not been lowered, let's say, in the 20 years. We have more than 80% of the population supporting the European integration process. And although it is taking a lot of time, still there is strong support. And I can also say that there is no other alternative. The European integration process is the key orientation for the society in Albania. That's why when, especially in the last years, when we hear and we debate that the process is not like it was before. There are a lot of uncertainties because of different crises in the EU institution, but also in member states, different mood, if I can say, regarding the enlargement process. It comes to us as a surprise that we don't have another plan. So that's the only direction we have been thinking and working towards. It's that of the European integration process. So in this sense, there is a little debate over other alternatives, and we have been trying also in our organization to increase the debate on the process and to look at it as not a certainty, because there are many issues, unexpected issues, which come in this process and in general in the EU, like we had with, and we are still suffering, let's say, from the pandemic, which brought unexpected threats and problems to all countries. And we, in these times of crisis, we also see that there is a stronger need for these challenges to be tackled all together. And this makes it even more necessity the European project in our country. Another aspect is why it's really important is the economic dimension. Most of the trade and economic relations in Albania, over 70%, are with EU countries. So we are affected from the crisis or problems that our neighboring EU countries encounter, and of course we are directly affected. So even without being within EU, we still feel the problems or crises that happen in this member states. So the relation and links are very strong, and that is why this process is crucial to our society and to our way that our orientation is shaped in the last decades.
Indeed, and thank you for Gledis for mentioning economic dimension and mentioning solidarity, which is more than ever crucial, not only for our countries but for Europe as a whole. You mentioned also that the support is high but is decreasing. This is something that is happening also in the last couple of months, maybe in North Macedonia, who has been quite a good pupil, so to say, in the EU accession process in the last couple of years. It really has a pro-European and pro-reform government that promised a lot on the EU agenda and did a lot in order to fulfill what was expected, especially the agreement with Greece about the name dispute and other reforms. But again, it failed to see that it was rewarded with the start of the accession negotiation. This also was true with Albania. Unfortunately, EU is constantly repeating, and this is something we want to see, that the policy has to be credible, has to be merit-based, but unfortunately, these kind of decisions are not really supporting the statement. And introducing bilateral disputes in the process is really something that is against EU values, so to say. So Nikola, can you tell us how is EU accession process now seen in North Macedonia? You had also some government turbulences recently. How is the public reacting, and what are you expecting in the next couple of months? Because we are looking to December and potential date for the accession negotiations opening.
Well, yeah, as a country, we have been really, let's say, good towards the EU in some ways. We have blockade for some years. Firstly, it was Greece, now it's Bulgaria. It is what it is. Unfortunately, for the other countries that are grouped with us, they have to stay with us. We are expecting the summit. There is a new government in Bulgaria. We are expecting that the talks will continue. We understand that the problems that the EU is currently facing seem to put the enlargement behind. It's not just Macedonia or Albania. It's with Serbia and Montenegro. The negotiations are slow. We are in the waiting room. I just have to add that the financial package for the region was an important and encouraging step that will finally, it's a step in the right direction. That financial injection will be very helpful during the expensive reforms that need to be done all across the Balkans. Regarding the support, unfortunately, the credibility and the support of EU are declining. For more than 20 years, we had more than 90% support for the EU integration, despite the blockades, despite the slow integration process. After the Prespa agreement, there was some more optimism, maybe, but the status quo that's in the last 2 or 3 years are significantly lowering the support, and now it's in the mid-70s and falling. It's time to change the narrative. We need to put more enthusiasm into the people. We need to put more enthusiasm into the stakeholders, because Western Balkans is Europe, is part of Europe. It's part of the future of the Europe. So all we really need is a clear pathway towards full membership, where the new methodology is applied, where EU can have breaks and can reward or maybe stop or reverse the progress. But it's a stick and carrot. You cannot just get the stick and never get the carrot. We need to be rewarded if we did something right. And that's only possible if the EU negotiation is open, the talks are open. That way EU can have a chance to say you did this okay, you did this wrong. This way we are just stuck, we are blocked, and the enthusiasm is leaving. So it's a unfortunate, I don't know how, it's sad.
At least unfortunate situation. Thank you, Nikola. Yes, Gledis is back with us. I just wanted to mention that all of you who are watching us on live stream on different social platforms and outlets of the European Movement International, you can pose a question, comment, or something. My colleagues are collecting those, and we will address some of these very shortly. But I wanted to ask Tyyne Karjalainen on this note that we were discussing already about the credibility of the EU, because you're dealing with EU foreign and security policy, and it has been criticized a lot, the decision-making process of the Council, particularly because the Commission and Parliament are quite vocal when it comes to some decisions on the EU enlargement. And it has been criticized a lot because it is calculated that there are more than 70 instances when a single EU accession country can be blocked in the process of the EU accession. So it's really not very fortunate when someone like North Macedonia or Albania cannot even start the accession negotiations, which is the beginning of the process that should be very transformative and rewarding for the country and for the EU. So can you tell us how do you see, and if you see, how can this impasse be overcome? And what are your comments, especially in the Council, I mean, the impasse?
Thank you very much, and thank you also to the previous speakers that already highlighted many very important points. Maybe to start with the problems of decision making in the Council. I think this is a very interesting topic, since it's a kind of a vicious cycle. So currently we have seen this block or stalemate in the Council, now especially Bulgaria blocking the advancing of negotiations in terms of North Macedonia. But what is the background? Why also the member states are blocking the accession process all the time, one of the crucial arguments has been that the European Union foreign and security policy decision making could halt even further if we have new members in the European Union with different worldviews and different foreign policy stances that would then halt the process and EU decision making in other cases. So we can see that there is the European Union has identified a risk of halting decision making, and this is one argument used in the that is used against advancing in the accession processes, but it's also now happening in the accession process, so that we are not advancing as we should. And indeed, what was already pointed out, that we cannot only use the sticks, but we should have the carrots as well. So this is definitely a crucial credibility problem for the European Union, that when we have a member state candidate that has actually taken the step required, and we are then not delivering the goods that have been paid, it's definitely not only severely harming the relationship with that particular state, but also the credibility of the European Union in the eyes of other potential candidates, and the European Union leverage that has been built on this membership prospect that we are offering the membership as we offer the membership and based on that demand the neighboring states to develop their independent national structures based on the European Union ideas. This whole tactic of leverage will suffer if we fail to then actually fulfill our promises. So that's a very severe risk, also not only for the Western Balkan states, but also for the European Union. But what has to be understood in terms of the decision making is indeed that there are quite many levels where the problems can occur. There can be a commission that does not as actively advance the enlargement as the current commission, and then the council can halt. But then we have seen that sometimes individual member states, in addition to being able to actually block the process, sometimes they can also play a crucial role advancing the process. Now, for example, the Berlin process is a great example of Germany playing a great and crucial role in supporting the enlargement when Commission was less effective in taking steps, and this is then another factor in the game. But one more is that also now what we see in Bulgaria, what we have seen in France, in the Netherlands, sometimes blocking or not supporting the process with the Western Balkans, is that there is not only the decision making in the European Union bodies and in the Council, but also the national politics, even local politics that play a role. And every time we have elections in the EU member states, that is a point where we can then see new problems occurring. Maybe I will stop here and not bring more.
Thank you so much, and thank you for mentioning the importance of the national member states and the capitals across Europe in shaping and advancing the EU enlargement policy. I wanted to ask you one question also to relate to this, because there were some proposals that maybe this is quite impossible to happen, that maybe for the EU enlargement and for the foreign policy, to some extent, the Council should adopt qualified majority voting system rather than unanimity, because at the beginning of the process, when you're starting, for example, the accession negotiation, where we're concluding the negotiations, etc., you should require unanimity. But for the series of these technical steps in between, it could be opportune to have a qualified majority voting system. Do you have any comment on this? Because I think it's mostly mentioned by the think tanks and policy experts from the Western Balkans. So maybe it's a wishful thinking.
Yeah, it's a very, very sensitive topic, of course, in some member states. For example, in Finland, we have discussed it a bit in also other foreign policy issues in terms of the EU decision making, and of course, it is a question then which states would then have the influence actually, and are the larger member states then in a ruling position, and how the smaller member states can affect the EU policy, but definitely in terms of smaller technical details, it is a different question than for example in a larger scale foreign policy questions, but in terms of how the procedure then can actually be amended, it is maybe a discussion that will not save, for example, Albania and North Macedonia now, because it is such a long time taking process that maybe now with this political process that we are having, I would not count on changing the decision making procedure.
If I may just add something on this topic, the think tanks and the civil society organizations, even some of our previous governments, were calling for that reform in EU. Of course, it's only a proposal because that was the situation at the moment. Now we are facing something similar. I just want to say that Western democracies sometimes do not understand that EU enlargement here on the Balkans is a social fabric, and it's what keeps people together. And if we continue with this status quo, nobody can say what will happen. We don't want to repeat the scenes from 20 or 30 years ago. That's something that nobody wants. And for example, in our situation, bilateral issues should be resolved bilaterally and with goodwill. We have it already done at least once with Greece. We had a mediator for 20 years. He didn't help. The governments decided that they wanted to make an agreement, and they made an agreement. So in the current situation, I hope that this bilateral issue will be done bilaterally resolved, because trying to insert history in taxation process is very dangerous, and it's undermining the credibility of the European Union. Not only that, but it's also ignoring the vast experience of EU in the last 70 years of promoting a process based on reconciliation, rule of law. Also, we have already Ireland and UK would have never become members if they decided to put their issues regarding history in the negotiation process, and they did become members. They are currently still discussing about their shared history, in a very non-confrontational manner, in an institutional settings, and that's something that we could take. For the blockade, the veto can be done later. There are many chapters that need to be opened and closed, but we need that boost of enthusiasm that something is happening. We can become members of the EU. It's not only on paper. There's a saying here in the Balkans. I think you already all know it. There's too much history in the Balkans, and instead of rewriting the history, we need to build a future together, with togetherness, solidarity, respect, and because we are neighbors, we are here. That's it. We cannot just look at it.
True, and exactly, we are looking up to the European Union to provide us the guidance in overcoming the difficult past, actually. Not to bring it on the table. But very important aspect from the perspective of the EU, but also from the perspective of the Western Balkan countries and citizens, is that EU integration process as such should bring really considerable reforms when it comes to the rule of law, independence of the judiciary, respect for the fundamental rights, freedom of the press, work of the civil society. And this has been indeed the founding block of the EU enlargement policy. With the revised enlargement methodology, it's one of the most important clusters that can also like previously to some extent, block the process if there is backsliding in the rule of law department or area, so to say. So I wanted to ask you, because many countries in the EU are not persuaded that the EU rule of law reforms, not only them, are going well, even in Albania and North Macedonia. Albania conducted very serious reforms, electoral reforms, the judiciary, and this is why the Commission proposed opening accession negotiation. But I wanted to hear from you, Gledis. Can you tell us, you're also working in the European movement and are by default critical, what is the state of affairs of the rule of law in Albania and what you see as a problematic aspect and where needs to be done more work?
Yes, thank you. It is true. This is the most important area of work for Albania, but also in general in the Western Balkans, I should say. And as regards Albania, you already mentioned we have gone through, and it's still going through, although now 5 years on, the justice reform, which is a very deep and also wide reform. It is affecting all the judiciary institutions. It is going through a vetting process, where all the judges and prosecutors are going through it. And for the moment, we have more than 60% of the judges and prosecutors who failed this test. So they have been removed from the system. So this shows the deep problematic of the judiciary system, which of course affects all other areas of development of the country, and also areas of which are part of the EU integration process. Like when we talk about the economy, of course, you need the judiciary, functional judiciary, or human rights, or freedom of expression, freedom of media. All these issues, at the end, they go to the court. So if the last resort for resolving these problems, it's not working, it's highly corrupt, it's not functional, then of course you cannot talk for a successful European integration process. Now we have seen a lot of improvements, but still, because as I mentioned, a lot of judges and prosecutors have been removed. Now a big backlog of cases is being built, and it will take time, because these reforms are costly, not only in terms of money invested, but also in the costs that it's the public and the businesses who are bearing this cost, because the justice system is not functional yet due to this deep reform. Anyway, I'm optimist about it, because I think this deep and wide reform is the only answer to the highly dysfunctional and corrupt justice system. Of course, it will need time, but at the same time, it needs the support from the public, which has been high, of course, from the institution, from the EU, also the major supporter of this reform. And it needs, at the political level, to be aware that these reforms are needed in order for the country to progress and to join the EU. It's of course, justice system is very important, but we also have to undergo these costly reforms also in other areas for the development of the country. And this is what I was discussing before, that it needs a lot of efforts and involvement for the whole society of the process. It's not a process only for the public administration or the politicians, because all of us are affected by it. So it needs involvement and participation, not only for the civil society, but the academia, the business community. It is a very important process to be trusted only to the politicians.
Thank you very much. Indeed, Nikola, I wanted to ask you the same question because we were discussing not so much internal reforms in North Macedonia, but also a lot of things have been done on this area, in North Macedonia. Can you tell us, are you satisfied with the level of reform at the moment?
Well, we have been in the waiting room from 2009. So we passed a lot of new EU regulations and everything is into the laws. Are we perfect? No, of course we're not, but it's not expected of us to be perfect at this moment. Every government so far is putting an emphasis on rule of law, on the judiciary. So, as I said before, all we need is a boost. All we need is a hand that, okay, everything, the path is open, just try our hardest to be alongside the other countries. We have the Project National Convention, which works on the Chapter 23, Judiciary and Fundamental Rights. We have talked and given recommendations for almost all of the most urgent problems in the country. It is good that the government representatives in the last 4 years that we're working are always there. They are working with us. They want to progress. It's not like we have a good cooperation with them. So the people are trying, but we only really need a boost. That is all I can say. The situation is not perfect. Is it getting better? Yes, but we still need a lot. We still need a lot on this topic.
Next session negotiations should be the phase and moment where most of the reforms are actually implemented and we see the benefit of those. Tyyne, I wanted to ask you, because while EU is very much engaged in the Western Balkan region, there are also other political actors who are politically, economically engaged, China, Russia, Turkey, United States, to mention all the possible actors who are there. How do you see their involvement, and is it possible that in this vacuum there could be divergent and very counterproductive influences in the Western Balkan region that could be counterproductive for the EU itself, not only for the region?
Thank you very much. As my background is in peace research, and I think from that perspective, it is always kind of risky for any area to have many international actors and great powers interested in one region. And I think that is definitely what is in the Western Balkans a case, that both the US, China, Russia, Turkey, EU, and also the European powers individually. I mean, the European states, not sorry if they are powers all anymore, but European states as well have a bilateral history, having their interests in the Western Balkans, and this is definitely a challenge for the area, since their national developments are not only in their hands. But I see that currently that this is also a factor where the Western Balkan states have developed kind of an ability to also utilize the situation where for example, the European Union is not the only only player in investing in the area. So we all know about the Chinese money playing a role in many of the states in that area, and while it is a challenge and it's perceived as a risk from the European Union perspective, it is also kind of it encourages the European Union also to be a better partner for the Western Balkan states, and the Western Balkan states can then also pressure the European Union to be a better partner, so that then the Chinese influence, for example, would not increase there, and this is where, of course, for example, in Serbia, it has been also the case of the European Union trying to prevent increasing of the Russian influence there again, and so on. So it is a risk for the area, but also sometimes an opportunity to pressure a little bit of their international partners to be actually better partners, and maybe my last point here would be that in terms of then now what will follow, now that there is maybe a new window of opportunity for North Macedonia and Albania, I think here these two states actually benefit from the fact that it is not only the European Union eyes that are on the region, but the European Union will knows that now also other that how the process now continues is followed also from other sides of the globe.
Right. Sorry, my reaction is a bit slow. We were discussing the rule of law as a fundamental block, but of the integration process, but also regional cooperation and good neighborly relations are really standing prominent as a request and a need for the Western Balkan and EU in this process. Just recently in 2020, at the Sofia summit, it was launched a common regional market initiative, which encompasses all of we have many regional initiatives, but this one I want to address, encompasses all of the Western Balkan countries in order to create an area which enables freedom of movement of people, goods, services, etc., based on the EU standards and values. But also parallelly and somehow similarly, three countries, North Macedonia, Albania, and Serbia, launched the Open Balkan Initiative, formerly Mini Schengen, which goes along the similar way, but maybe faster and maybe deeper integration. And this has been refused so far by the other countries in the Western Balkans and raised also some concern in the EU. So I wanted to ask you, Gledis, what do you think about these two initiatives and how helpful they could be, both of them, common regional market, of course, but also Open Balkan for the EU integration process, and what could be the dangers if there is a process which doesn't include all of the Western Balkan countries?
Well, I think it's a positive step towards the European integration process, because you start integrating regionally, and then it's much easier then to be integrated in the European market. And also there are different opportunities to discover. I mean, in the Western Balkans. Which up to now it has not been the case due to we know the recent history and the many bilateral problems between the countries. So this regional integration, hopefully it will help to remove the bilateral issues, so not to see what's happening now with the veto of Bulgaria, or before with the veto of Greece towards North Macedonia, and economically speaking, to be profitable for the countries, and also to be more appealing to the EU countries, because we know that economy is a strong fundamental pillar of the EU integration process. Of course, the political aspect is important, but it cannot sustain the process in longer term, only the political will and political support for it. What I see as a threat or as a problem would be that different processes would distract from the countries from the main objective, which is that of joining the EU. So these processes should be well aligned with the European integration process, with the accession process, and that is why it is also important the role that key member states play in the regional integration. It was mentioned before, the Berlin process, that is very important, bringing the attention of key member states like Germany or France and other countries to the region, and opening or strengthening the perspective of the accession process. of the positive result of the accession process. Of course, it is needed that all the countries participate in these initiatives. It doesn't make sense partial regional integration. So that's why a strong involvement of member states and, of course, the institutions would be the key of success to these processes.
Thank you very much indeed. Some are worrying that these partial integrative processes are alternative to the EU accession, which is definitely something that none of the countries or majority of the citizens want to see. And you mentioned also economy, and Nikola was discussing this previously, saying that the reforms are quite expensive. The EU has been the biggest donor, investor, but also donor in the Western Balkan countries. And it has increased in this new multi-annual financial framework of 7 years instrument for pre-accession assistance, which is given to the Western Balkans to 14 billion euro, I think, which is previously it was 11 billion. It also announced the economic investment plan for the Western Balkans of 9 billion, which should provide stimulus and additionally attract some 20 billion euros for the very strategic investments. But again, there is a huge difference, economically speaking, between the Western Balkans and the EU. Western Balkan GDP per capita is 3 times lower on average than the EU's GDP. And also there is a very worrying trend of many people, especially young people, leaving the countries trying to individually integrate to the EU rather than dedicate to the process. Nikola, can you tell me how much this assistance is effective, visible, also to the ordinary citizens in daily life, but also how much it is important for building the competitiveness and prosperity in North Macedonia, and what more could be done?
Well, yeah, this is a step forward, and it's a very needed step forward. But we are not only in need of financial support. We need democracy, we need political experience. The economic support and the investments are great if they're supplementary. There were previously talks about being offered to join the European Economic Area, but from the elites here, that was deemed as a second-tier membership and something that would just put the problems under the rug. As I said before, we need the EU to be clear with its intention. We need a clear commitment if they plan on enlarging, dedicated roadmap tailored to the needs of the region that we should follow. It's the credibility of the EU that's at stake here, and it's the closest neighborhood to the EU. Without it, the EU is losing power, and I'll just briefly reply from something said earlier. The geopolitical powers are here. Russia, China, even the US is more active here in the country. So we really need for EU to become strong and to support not just financially, but politically. The problems regarding the young people is a problem from throughout the Balkans. We had 500,000 or 600,000 in the last 10 years that migrated to the European Union. So these are the problems that I'm talking about, putting them under the rug. We need to be shown that European Union is a partner that we can count on, and that we should show them that they could count on us. And we only ask for an opportunity to show it.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it's not only not even the neighborhood, but some say inner backyard of the European Union, the Western Balkans. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions that we received from the comments. First, I think it's important to address this because Gledis, you were mentioning that nobody was discussing in Albania alternatives to the EU, that now you're trying to discuss this, and someone is asking why are you, as a European Movement Albania, organizing debates to find alternatives to accession. I think that's not what you said, but if you could just clarify what you were thinking.
Yes, well, of course, we are not looking or finding alternatives, but we are discussing, because there's always the information or questions asked about if there are other alternatives. And I already mentioned that for Albania there are no other alternatives, and of course it's positive to have good relations with other countries, with countries who invest in the place, and this is something that each country looks forward to it. So, and of course, for the countries like Albania and other Western Balkan countries, it's very important to attract as much as they can foreign investors. But as we know, sometimes these investors has strings attached, and like also the EU has, but the EU offers the same standards that they apply to their countries, and these are related to the democracy, to the balance of power, to the human rights, and these are issues which are very important for us as European countries, and especially when we have a history of a difficult history of abuse with this principles, which are not deeply rooted in our culture. So that's why we desperately need the EU model. At the same time, it is important to assess and to see what are the other factors influencing the region, influencing the EU in itself, because these are debates which are also occurring in new and old member states, and to be ready for such discussion and for such decision-making processes in the future. So this is very important. It is something which needs not to be neglected by saying that we have our clear direction and we know where we want to go, but we have to consider all these issues and to be better prepared to address these challenges now and in the future.
Right. Thank you, Gledis. Yeah, it's also very important to know the arguments and to have solid arguments when you are actively involved in the promoting the EU integration, especially for the skeptics and those that are not convinced. So I understand what you're saying, and it's very important what you mentioned, that not EU is only the biggest investor, but it's the most quality investor, so to say, because not every investment is bottom line good investment, as we can see also these days in Serbia with the Chinese investments. I wanted to ask you, Nikola, maybe to comment on this, because we have a question. We were mentioning, presuming that everybody knows the details of the particular questions we are addressing, but some people are asking what are exactly the motives of Netherlands, France, Bulgaria, Greece to block the EU accession process. So maybe you and Tyyne could comment on this.
I could briefly. Netherlands, it was, if I recall correctly, due to the Albanian reforms not being deemed good enough in fight against corruption. Regarding the France, it was about the methodology. They wanted to have checks and balances. They wanted to make it possible to reverse. So now that is done, and we accept the methodology. Regarding the Bulgarian veto, it's a problem with history, with the language. It's a really big, really big problem. If I start in details to explain what happened. And with Greece, it was the naming issue that we solved with a bilateral agreement, and we changed the name of the country. I just have to add that blockade that we are currently having from the former Bulgaria is blocking the agreement with Greece, as lots of the things in the naming dispute agreement were linked with the start of negotiation in chapters. So currently we are not we are not obliged to do anything about the renaming of institutions and stuff like that, because it's linked to the progress in the EU integration. We did already beforehand some things as a goodwill, but if this blockade persists for, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, who knows how will the people react and feel, if they feel, because the naming dispute was said to be the only thing that's blocking us from starting the negotiations. And after changing the name, which was very painful for most of the society, we did enter NATO, but we are still blocked with the EU, and EU has always been a priority for the country for the last 30 years. So we have to be rational.
Thanks. Yes, it has been, some say, really a huge sacrifice on behalf of the North Macedonia to come with the agreement. And also, just recently, I read that North Macedonia concluded all the details and technicalities about joining the NATO in the shortest possible period compared to the other countries in 19 months. So there is also some public administration and technical capacity that you can count on, which is good also for the EU accession process. Tyyne, if you can also comment on this, because you're mentioning national politics, and I think it's important because national internal politics very often influences these decisions.
Yes, definitely. I think Nikola definitely highlighted many of the crucial issues already, so I will just add to what I have to that. I think one thing was also President Macron also emphasized that he would rather see the European integration process deepening rather than broadening in the sense of new members. And this is definitely not to do necessarily with the Western Balkan states and their individual cases, but rather indeed the European integration process and its problems, and of course also French national politics. But definitely the internal problems that the European Union currently has in terms of the rule of law challenges in some member states, then our trauma from the migration crisis 2015 that has brought border politics and controlling migration as a high political topic, then the decision-making challenges in terms of any foreign policy issues, defense policy issues, security policy issues. These are things that definitely have catched the attention of the member states and also made them more cautious and careful with having even more states doing the decisions and probably having different views, but also different approaches in terms of, for example, dealing with the migration pressure.
Thank you very much. I'm just checking if there are any particular questions. There was one related to the relationship between religious belief and the acceptance of Balkan states. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on this.
I can just briefly say we are a multicultural country that is less than 2 million people. So there is statistically 20% that are Albanian. So let's say that those 20% are Muslim. So that's like 400,000 people, even if they all migrated towards Europe. So it's very insignificant amount of people that would migrate, if that's the question regarding the migration. I feel that religion should have no place in this discussion. There are talks that it has, because Turkey has been on the outside for so long. Some people say it's because of the religion. But for us, I feel that it should not be a problem, because it's a small country and it's a country that is already migrating. So the EU accession won't stop it. It will stop it because maybe more people will stay here because they'll find opportunity to live here and not move away, and not the other way around.
To provide the realistic perspective for those 50+% of young people in Albania, North Macedonia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina that wish to leave the countries rather to create a better environment there. We are closing really soon. And before we depart, I would like to ask you, what do you see as a way forward now for the EU and for Albania and for the North Macedonia? Hopefully, the accession negotiations will be unblocked, but in any possible scenario, what is the way forward? I want to also to mention that there are some are proposing phased-in integration. Also, in the Open Balkan initiative in the last meeting had one of the formulations that EU should allow in this phase of stalemate, which they blame the EU the most, should allow for the phased-in integration in terms of the sectoral policies, but in terms of also other issues. So what do you see as a way forward? And also particularly for you, Gledis and Nikola, as a civil society activist, what do you see your role in the future integration process?
Well, if I can start, the way forward, of course, I mentioned that the only alternative is EU. Of course, there are different courses to it, especially now that we know that it's not going to be a very speedy process due to many reasons, not only the problems in EU, but also the preparedness of our countries, our reform fatigue, let's say, also had started to kick in, and especially when it's not supported by big political decisions, like it's happening with Macedonia. I see that in this case there's also an increased need for the role of other actors, civil society, of course, because we need to keep alive the enthusiasm for the process, for the target that we as a society have, and also related to the need to improve the standards and quality of living in our countries. Also, Nikolai also mentioned that a lot of people want to leave, and a lot of people are leaving because there are better opportunities there, which can be attained in different countries of Europe, and this is weakening our societies because it's a continuous immigration of people, and especially for small countries, this is directly reflected to the decision-making process, to the quality of life, and to the future perspective. So it is needed to work in both directions, one with the EU countries and institutions to make sure that this perspective is alive and it's working, and will be part of EU one day. And another in the internal dimension to work with the people, with institutions here to make sure that these reforms are producing and are reflected in the well-being of our people and our societies.
Thank you very much. And I know, Nikola, that European Movement North Macedonia is keeping the enthusiasm for 30 years now. I think it's one of the oldest, or maybe the oldest, together with Croatia, national councils. How do you plan to keep the enthusiasm among yourself, but also in general when it comes to EU integration in the future?
Well, we as a country have invested too much in the EU integration process. So as a civil society organization, all we have to do is keep working. We need to keep pushing and to keep doing things that would help the country faster to quickly finish the accession negotiations once they begin. Yes, we celebrate 30 years this year. We hope that many more are to come. Regarding the situation, I feel that the EU should show leadership and use one of the many instruments that they have at their disposal, like for promotion of dialogue, fostering networks between the civil society organizations in the region, with one goal, and that is to promote reconciliation between all societies. And that is the only way that we can go forward. We need to build bridges of friendship. We need to bring the people of different countries closer. And currently, instead of working to be closer, we are dividing, and that's not a thing that I want to say right now, but that's the reality. So we need to stop, reflect, and turn around. We need to start building those bridges between all of the countries.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on the anniversary. Tyyne, do you have a comment of how do you see the way forward for the EU, maybe? The best way or the plausible way?
Thank you. Maybe I would emphasize the role of active member states also, and also not to be in a position to give advice, but anyway to do it. That it is also important for the Western Balkan states to have strong bilateral relations with the European Union member states, not only with the European Union institutions such as the Commission or EU delegations, but the European Union member states, when they are active and when they are operating in the council meetings, they can actually make a difference. So that is something that I just want to highlight. And of course, we are now looking to the first intergovernmental conference, hopefully to be launched, and which would be a high political signal also to all Western Balkan states, and I have my fingers crossed for that.
Thank you so much, and thank you for stressing the really important role that bilateral relationships can have in the process. I would like to thank my excellent panelists for taking your time and for sharing with us your thoughts and suggestions. I would like to thank you everyone for joining us today, and particularly it's very important, I think, that we are organizing this with European Movement Finland. Not always it is seen as a country that has interest in the region and in the enlargement policy, but our council and this initiative proves differently. So stay tuned also and follow European Movement in order to learn about the next debates and events within this initiative Spotlight on the Western Balkans. As we have heard, the cost of non-EU and the cost of non-EU integration is really high, political, economic, for both sides, for both the Western Balkan countries and for the EU itself. So hopefully all the involved will realize that soon. Thank you very much.